Hey, what's up everybody? It's Carpo. Earth Day again. Doing another quick video here. I had this thought that occurred to me when I was watching this show. I was watching a documentary, one of the Electric Universe documentaries, and they were talking about Saturn. And you know, I'm fascinated with the idea that, first off, don't quote me on any of this. I'm kind of just going off of what I understood from what they were trying to say. Was that the theory was that Saturn was perhaps a brown dwarf of sorts, or that Saturn was a sun that never quite got started, and that perhaps at one time Saturn had its own solar system. I may have totally read that wrong, but that's what I interpreted from what I had heard, and I was fascinated by that. And that gave the idea that the binary star system that could very well lend credence to the idea that maybe the whole idea of Nibiru is really the second sun, and it really is maybe Saturn. You know, I don't know. I'm not an astronomer, but it just so happened that just a couple hours after I watched that documentary, I was watching a completely unrelated show. It was the Cosmos, which has been on lately. I think it's up to like episode 7 with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it's interesting. It's fun. It's a fun show. I love shows like that. And during the show, right in the middle, there was this whole chapter about Saturn and Saturnalia, and how Saturnalia was the festival where the servants would be served by the kings, and the slaves would be served by the masters, and everybody would party and drink and have a great time. The festival of Saturn, which occurred in December, and of course this is what the Christians turned into Christmas. They conveniently took it and made it their own, and this is nothing new, and cultures have done this for a long time. But the reason why I don't talk about the Saturn thing is because there's such a degree of paranoia surrounding it. Every time that I mention Saturn, somebody comes and attacks me about it, or thumbs down the video, and I'm sure this one will be too, because there's a huge conflict between people who are occult and those who are religious, and I'm not either. I just find that the ideas are fascinating and that they resonate with me. That maybe Saturn was an unfired star. It was just, to me, just an amazing idea. But what really hit home for me was when they said that in Greek mythology, Saturn as a god, Saturn devoured his own children. And as soon as I heard that line, I just thought, that I haven't heard anybody really, I haven't looked into this to see what other people have said about it. But my first impression of that was that if Saturn consumed his own children, then that could very well mean that Saturn perhaps had a solar system at one time, and perhaps it devoured its own planetary bodies, or perhaps something else happened, you know, which, if you're following me, that you know, it would make sense. If it was a sun, then it would have its own children. And so I want to know what people think about that. If there's anybody else out there who's heard of Saturn being an unfired sun, I'm going to look more into it, because I think it's really an interesting idea. The electric universe theory is just too interesting. I don't believe every single aspect of it's correct. It never is. But when they start comparing cave drawings and stuff like that, it's you know, to possible celestial events, it leads one to wonder. So I really don't know, but I want to know why people are so afraid of Saturn, and why people are so obsessed with Saturn at the same time. But I can see why the ancients were. If you've ever looked through a telescope at Saturn, even with the small one, you can see the rings. If you've ever looked through a telescope at Venus, you can see the crescent of Venus as the sun reflects off of it. It doesn't look like a round planet, it looks like a crescent moon, an almost full crescent moon. So perhaps there were some celestial events that happened in history which got people very interested in, you know, Saturn itself. But I'd like to know why the ancients found Saturn so fascinating. Was it closer to us at one time? Was there some ancient solar system that perhaps turned into the asteroid belt. You know, these are things that people can say, well, science has already shown us what the asteroid belt is, and we already know how the planets were formed, but we really don't. If you look at the solar system and the way it's designed, you know, we have all these small planets out, and then the asteroid belt, and then all these gas giants out there in the middle of space that are completely out of proportion of where you would think that they might be. This is, you know, these are still scientific ideas that are being learned about, but you know, I know a lot of people believe that science has already answered these questions, but it's left a lot to be desired, and I myself have not found any satisfactory answers to know why the ancients were so obsessed with planets, how they knew about planets, what they considered them to be, and why they gave anthropomorphic meaning to them, and created myths such as Saturn devouring his own children. And what does that mean to you? And what do you people think about it? So, peace everybody, and have a great Earth Day.